So, this week, I finally headed out to the military museum. Now, the whole reason I wanted to go here was not simply because I'm a history student, but also because it was only a 20-minute walk from the university. And I've seen some depressing looking schools in my time, but that is one depressing looking school. There it is, that's where we're going. Once I arrived at the military museum, before even entering the building, there were many military vehicles on display outside, like this vehicle, designed to probably bridge gaps over rivers or ditches. And this giant propeller, put up as a monument to those who served on ships in the engineering sections like the engine, etc. There were these armoured personnel carriers next to a folded up artillery piece. And then something that I wasn't expecting, a T-72 made in the Soviet Union. This one ended up here because it was given to East Germany, and then when East Germany reunited with Germany, it no longer was used, was tested on a bit, and was eventually sent to this museum. Upgraded versions of this tank, like the T-90, are currently the mainstay of the Russian army fighting in Ukraine, and are also being used by the Ukrainians alongside NATO tanks. Further at the back of the car park, there was a big display of multiple armoured vehicles. I am not particularly interested in Cold War vehicles, and much more interested in World War II ones, so I'll explain those ones. First, we have this Canadian armoured car. Then we have a T-34-85. You can tell it's an 85 version because of the different turret that it has. This, of course, was the mainstay of the Soviet army during World War II. Then we have a Sherman, of course, the mainstay of the US Army during World War II, but the Canadians used many of them as well, of course. Next, we have the glorious Centurion, built by the British, and arguably the first main battle tank ever produced. Going into service in 1945, it was a bit late to see the end of World War II, but was used in many conflicts thereafter. Then we have the Churchill, another tank used in World War II by Britain and its allies across the Empire, including Canada. Then we have a British 17-pounder anti-tank gun next to a different American version next to a piece of the World Trade Center. Outside the museum, there are also a number of war memorials commemorating various different things. But apart from that, it's now time to go into the museum itself. The first thing to see at the museum is just below the reception area, where they have a depiction of Canadian forces fighting in 1944 during the Second World War. Canadian troops contributed significantly to the Second World War, fighting in North Africa, Italy, having an entire beach to themselves during the Normandy, then through the liberation of France and the fight into Germany proper. Next were 4 galleries dedicated to 4 different military units and their histories. First was Lord Strathcona's Horse, or the Royal Canadians. This unit started as a cavalry unit all the way back in the 1890s, with many Victoria Cross winners. There was also this plate purchased by peacekeepers of this unit during their peacekeeping operations in Sinai in Egypt. Next was the King's Own Calgary Regiment, first formed in 1910. The great informational video that they had in this gallery. This gallery had a slightly immersive depiction of the First World War with sounds and mannequins, along with a specific exhibit to a famous sniper during the First World War that was part of this regiment, and the gun that he used. Well, one of them. Going into World War II, this unit took part in the Dieppe raid, which was a failure, but gave much needed experience to amphibious landings that would be used in D-Day, along with a depiction of a prisoner of war camp, which many of the people captured during the Dieppe raid would have been sent to. Next was a gallery to the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. As the name suggests, this regiment was partially sponsored in its creation by Princess Patricia during World War I. As a result of this, the gallery has a very impressive mock-up of a trench from the First World War. The gallery continued with weapons and vehicles from World War II to its peacekeeping operations with the UN, along with this recoilless rifle. There was also this very well thought out memorial to all the soldiers who died in various wars that the unit was involved in. Next, there's the gallery to the Calgary Highlanders. Admittedly, I didn't take much footage of this gallery, though it had much of the same things that the others had, their contributions to the First and Second World Wars, and their further contributions in the modern era to wars like Afghanistan and UN peacekeeping. I did find this stand particularly interesting to Japanese-Canadian soldiers who fought in World War II despite people's prejudices. Next was the Army of Alberta section. Whilst this section could have been much the same as the others, it luckily turned out not to be, going over the many conflicts with Indigenous populations that the Canadian Army had in this region, to the contributions played by women and priests, transitioning into a great focus on modern conflicts and UN peacekeeping. Finally, to end off the Army section of the Military Museum, there was this captured World War I German artillery piece, and this absolutely cursed contraption. Yes, those are recoilless rifles strapped to the back of a jeep. Next was a temporary exhibition, which switched every few months, I presume, this time dedicated to propaganda, displaying many propaganda posters throughout Canadian history. This was particularly useful for me, since one of the topics I had been covering that week was propaganda used to convince Canadians from the East to travel and set up farms in this area of the country, of which there were many examples. From this exhibition, I also learned that the French Canadians do not mess around when it comes to propaganda posters. Next was the Air Force section of the museum. This section went right through from the Air Force's beginnings in World War I to World War II and its contributions to Bomber Command. It also had a reconstruction of the prisoner of war camp from The Great Escape, as several Canadians helped in that adventure. I know that many people from the UK have heard of The Great Escape, though I wonder how many have heard of it in Canada. There are also several mock-up plane fuselages, which inside had projectors projecting war stories from Canadian veterans of the Second World War. Final section contained that of the Navy, and a bit of the Air Force. This was because this was a giant hangar which could contain giant objects. It, of course, contained many torpedoes and periscopes and massive gun batteries from naval warships, along with a great many model boats. The most impressive things of this gallery were the naval aircraft. They can be seen as naval aircraft because their wings can fold up. This was so that they could fit more of them on aircraft carriers like this one. The one aircraft that I recognised him instantly was the Seafire, the naval version of the famous Spitfire from World War II. This was also my first time seeing an actual Enigma machine. The machine that famously made the German codes for most of World War II, which the Germans throughout almost the entire war thought uncrackable, despite the fact that the British, with the help of the Polish, had cracked them almost at the beginning of it. Finally, in some buildings just outside the museum was the Cold War exhibit, with some more jet aircraft, a mock-up Cold War nuclear bunker, and a recreation of the Berlin Wall. And that was the Military Museum in Calgary. It is a fantastic museum with a great many things, well worth the cost of entry. And even without paying the entrance fee, it's possible to see some wonderful things just going to the car park. The museum also has an archive, which I may end up using in some of my research at some point, or maybe not. But with all that done, it was time for me to head home, which means until next time, I'll see you later.